Welcome back to the Adventures with Sara P podcast. I am your host, Sara P, a 19-year-old girl trying to figure out this whole adulting thing through life's adventures. And today I wanted to talk about adventures in difficult times just because it's scholarship season and I have been applying for a lot of scholarships. And one of the scholarships that I applied for was students that have like a disability. And if you don't know, I have an auditory processing disorder. And so how we like to describe it is when you are talking to someone and they have like a very heavy accent, it takes you like a little bit longer to process what they're saying. Like you have to try really hard to like make sure you're understanding the words that they're saying. And so that's pretty much my life, like 24/7. And so anyway, I was filling out this scholarship and it was like kind of like I was describing like getting diagnosed and all that. And so in the middle of writing this essay, I just started crying because I hadn't really like I guess experienced the emotions that I felt when I was younger or kind of acknowledged that time period. I've kind of just blocked it out. And so I feel like growing up, like I just didn't like talking about my disability just because I was bullied for it in like elementary school and I thought of it more as a weakness. And like I'll kind of just share like why that might be. And so I was behind everyone else in the reading and writing section in elementary school. For us, like we had it where it was set up where it was like when you're in first grade, you have to be at the first grade reading level, or you can be above or below, but like the balance is first grade reading. And so I was always below it. And so I just like really struggled with like understanding the material. I would come home to do homework and I would just cry at like the kitchen table because I felt so stupid for not knowing what everyone else knew. Like I didn't understand what I was reading. I didn't know how to do like the grammar and the writing. And so eventually my teacher at the time talked to my parents and said that she thought it would be best if I got tested for any kind of learning disability. So I went and did that, and all I remember is it literally took the entire day. Like you're just like sitting taking tests. They like have like a hearing thing and you have to say a word. Like they say a word and then you have to repeat back the word, and they do it at different volumes, and then you have to write like a couple essays, and then you have to like do like a grammar thing. And I've taken that test, I think now 3 times. And the most recent time I did it was for going into college. And I was extremely drained after, but I just remember Taylor released Fearless Taylor's version. So my dad treated me to Target and I got the CD. But anyway, back to younger Sara. So in elementary school, I got diagnosed with my auditory processing disorder, but with that came accommodations, which you would think would be great, which would make my life 10 times easier. No, I had to wear an FM device, which is pretty much a hearing aid, like in your ear. And my teacher would wear like a microphone and it like connected so I could hear better in my right ear because my right ear was more dominant, like at hearing better than my left. And so I got made fun of by this one kid, and who on earth knows what he's doing now? Probably nothing. But he would bully me about like being behind in class, being like having to wear this thing in my ear, making the teacher wear a microphone, like needing special attention. And it just made my life 10 times harder. And I was super embarrassed. And I couldn't help that I had an auditory processing disorder. And so I feel like at that point in my life, I kind of just shut down and I went into like a shell. And I didn't really get to come out of it until I switched schools and I stopped wearing the FM device, which I would just like to say, if you are going through a difficult time, do not give up. This was just like, I went from a really big public school to a really small private school, and I no longer needed to wear the microphone and the FM device. So I will say that kind of did help the situation, but running away is almost never the answer. However, it was in this case, so there is that. But anyway, back to like just being able to experience those emotions, it kind of just like opened my eyes to how I would, if I was in that situation today, like how I would handle it. Obviously, I was like 6, 7, 8 at the time. So emotionally wasn't very mature, didn't really know what was going on. And so I was just thinking about like how I would be able to like handle that situation now. And so I have a few things, but I also have another story about difficult times, because when I think about going through difficult times, I think about being back in elementary school and getting diagnosed with my auditory processing disorder. And then also just last year, being a freshman in college, moving away from Florida to Maryland, getting this realization that Maryland actually is cold and snow is not as cool as I thought it was. But, you know, that's okay. That's a story for another time. But also being put in a situation where I was surrounded by one person who was just not helpful in any situation. I'll give you an example. So there was like a little debacle that happened, and I had apologized, and I was like, I'm so sorry, that's not what I intended, like that's not what I meant at all. And their response back to me was, well, I know that's not what you intended, but I'm gonna take it like that, or I'm gonna take it that way. Like, I'm sorry, like what? And so they just made my life so much harder than it already was. Like, I was already struggling being away from home. I was already struggling being like adjusting to college and being a college athlete. And then like they made that on top of everything else just so much more difficult, and it just put me into such a bad mental space that I like couldn't do it anymore. And it got to a point where I kind of was just like, I hate how I'm living my life. I need to change. And so here I am today, doing way better. They're no longer in my life, so that's great. But I will say the difficult times do not go away. They just keep on coming. And so now I'm in another situation, and this time the person is not leaving. And so it's making my life a little bit harder, but I've learned to kind of cope with it, and I've kind of like found some things that have helped me either recharge my battery or kind of handle those situations, or outright ignore them. It kind of depends, but I have some tips, because being in a difficult situation and being in a difficult time, it feels like it's never going to end. It feels like it's just going to keep going on and on and on. And so reflecting back on all of these experiences that I've had, which when I think about difficult times, those are the three that I kind of think of. I have some ways that I kind of just like worked through it, or ways that I wish I had worked through it then that I would do now. And so let's just dive right on into it. So I would say the first thing I have is acknowledging your emotions. It's okay to feel angry or sad or whatever you're feeling. I think the first step is just acknowledging those emotions. I feel like if I had acknowledged the emotions when I was in elementary school, I wouldn't have like built up this like wall inside myself about like being paranoid about talking about my disability, and I wouldn't have like having that essay, I wouldn't have like built up all this like build up. It kind of just would have been like another part of me, like where it's like, oh yeah, like remember that, like. So I would say the first thing to do is acknowledge your emotions. They're totally valid no matter what you're feeling. If you're feeling super angry at somebody, totally valid. If you're feeling sad about yourself or someone else, totally valid. So I think the first step is just acknowledging your emotions and making sure that you validate them, because like just knowing that like you have a right to be whatever emotion you're feeling, I think is super important, and first getting through a difficult time. Next, we have reach out for support. Oh wait, just kidding. I want to add to acknowledge your emotions. Allow yourself to experience whatever you're feeling. It goes with like acknowledging it, but it's also kind of different. And you can acknowledge your emotions, and if you acknowledge them and kind of move on, you're not experiencing them. And I think it's really important to like sit in that sadness or sit in that anger for a little bit and kind of just like reflect on why you're feeling that way, or what like kind of triggered that emotion. Now on to the next point, reach out for support. I would say talk to someone that you can trust and who is willing to listen. It's great if you want to go to someone, but if they're just gonna like give you advice and not really listen fully to the situation, it's not gonna be the same. And so like I know when I call my mom, like I'm gonna call her and I'm just gonna be able to like spit all the words out, and she's just gonna be like and then at the end she'll give me like a little advice or her experience and what's worked and what hasn't. But just having someone that'll just listen to you rant or be angry or happy or sad, just someone that's willing to like be there for you, I think is super important to try and find. And if you don't have that, it can be a little bit more difficult just in like feeling alone in the situation. So just maybe journal it out, or just like put on some headphones, just sit in a room, go for a walk, and kind of just like talk yourself through it. I've done that when before I didn't feel like I could talk to my mom or like any of my friends about certain things or certain people. And so I would just put on my headphones and I would just sit on my bed in like darkness. So I'd turn off the lights and I would kind of just like walk through like how I was feeling, why I was feeling that way, like what kind of triggered it, what I thought was going to be like the best solution for something. However, I will say like moms somehow always know like the right words to say, or like in any situation. So when in doubt, ask your mom. But I will say just either reaching out for support, whether it's like an authority figure, if it's like a coach, a teacher, a professor, if it's a family member, if it's a friend that you really trust, just someone that's going to be there to be able to listen to you, I think will help kind of get you through that difficult time. Because like having someone else's perspective on anything is great, especially someone that has your best interest in mind. And so I would recommend that. But again, if you feel like you don't have someone that's going to support you in like a certain situation, or you don't feel like someone's going to be there to listen, I recommend just putting on headphones, either your favorite artist or just like white noise, and kind of just like talking to yourself, or if you like to journal, maybe doing that. The next thing I have is focus on self-care. I feel like times that are difficult can be so incredibly draining for your social battery, for your physical battery, for just your battery in general. And I feel like taking time for yourself is super important, and taking that self-care or just letting your body rest. For me, my self-care and my body resting are kind of the same thing. And so for me, like I just know when I'm in high intense situations where it's like someone and I are not getting along, or there's someone that's making me anxious, just finding a space that's comfortable for you. For me, that's kind of just like my room in my apartment, or if it's the gym, or just sitting in a car, or just sitting outside, like being by yourself, finding a place where you can kind of just like fill up your battery is super important. And for me, I've kind of had this struggle where like coming home isn't like I'm not able to put down my guard until I'm like in my room. And so being able to kind of just find that space for you is super nice. So if you're sharing a room, like you're in a dorm and you have a roommate, like finding a space that you can feel comfortable. Like I know in our dorms we had like quiet rooms and no one was ever really in there, so finding a space like that might work. Or if it's not like somewhere that you can be by yourself, if you're in a situation where that's the case, like putting on your headphones. And like I feel like going to the gym, I feel like no one really looks like, everyone's like kind of doing their own thing at the gym. And so like maybe just like going for a walk, or just like sitting in like one of the studios. We have like yoga studios at our campus gym, and so maybe just like sitting in there, turning off the lights, putting on your headphones, kind of just being with your thoughts. Or maybe even the library. I know that one's also not as like private, but we have like little cubby rooms, and so I feel like that could also work. But kind of just doing some self-care, spending some time alone, in which you're able to like refill up your battery, because being in high intense situations or just being in difficult times is really draining, I feel like, especially emotionally. And so being able to just recharge your battery is super important. But also just like doing things that you like, because being in a difficult time, I've learned that it can be draining, especially if it's a situation get under your skin, or if it's a person get under your skin. And so being able to do things that you enjoy, that they can't take away from you, I think is super important. So for me, I love to read, and that's something no one can ever really take away from me. And so just sitting in my room with my little book, with my headphones on, and just reading at night really helps me build my battery up. But I will say too, that if someone like is bullying you or is making your life a little bit harder, like I think it's super important to remember that like they're probably going through something that is so unattainable for you to like comprehend, that they're taking it out on you. Like looking back at these situations, like I like can tell that they were either hurting in some way, or they were kind of jealous of like something. And so whether it's your success or your personality or the things that you like, just know that like it's not personal, and that's really hard to kind of understand. But when I've reflected back on pretty much all three of these situations, I just remember that I'm not getting attacked because it's like personal. It's they're picking a fight most of the time, and it's because they're either insecure about themselves, or they're not confident or as confident as I can be, or they're jealous of the success that I've been able to have like so far. And I don't know, I feel like this is like a mean thing to say, but those people, where are they in life? I don't know. Like, where are they going to be in life? Probably nowhere I would want to be. And that's kind of where I like talk about surrounding yourself with people that you want to be like, that have similar like characteristics as you, or similar values as you. Like, you want to surround yourself by people that you want to be like, or that like you get like, not that you get along with, but like, if I'm going to surround myself with someone that has a positive attitude. I don't want to surround myself with someone that has a negative attitude, because if I surround myself with people that have a negative attitude, I'm also going to start thinking negatively, and I don't want that. And so that's kind of what I think about when someone is picking a fight, or you're in a situation that you don't want to be in, and it's just a difficult time. Just kind of remembering that, like, who you are, like who your values are, maybe thinking about what their values are, and kind of understanding where they're coming from, and like why they might be so mean. And just remembering, like, wherever they're gonna be in life, you probably don't want to be there. And so just remembering that, and kind of keeping that in the back of your head when they go to pick a fight and you're just like, I'm not doing this. And so in some of those situations, I've kind of just, there have been some difficult people in my life, and I've kind of just like upright ignored them. Like, they'll start to have a conversation with me, and I'll either go to like take a phone call, or I'll just keep my headphones on. Like, and certain situations, like, I'll just put my headphones on, and so like I'm not disturbed, and like I don't have to hear what they have to say. Like, I'm just in my own little world. In other situations, kind of just talking to different people. Like, if you're in like a group setting and they're there, like kind of just like picking different people that like you align more with. And so I would also say there's that. I wouldn't say just like outright ignore everything, because you can't just avoid certain things. And so, but I would say if you are in a living situation where you're living with someone that you don't get along with, or that they like to pick a fight, just putting on your headphones and just doing your own thing has been really helpful. Or being in a group setting, and I feel like in group settings though, there's always like certain groups within the big group, and so kind of just like picking the people that you align with to be like hang around more. And yeah, I would say that's my biggest tip on that. But going back to some things that have worked for me is breaking down tasks, so making things more manageable and taking it one step at a time. Going back to the story I gave from last year, just being able to kind of process like each situation that I was being put in by this person, and kind of just taking it one step at a time. Obviously I was trying, well, okay, I can't say obviously, I wasn't prioritizing like myself or my schoolwork. I was kind of letting this like eat at me. And so I would say if I had taken it one step at a time, and I kind of had just focused on myself first, and then my schoolwork, and then like practice, and then this person, I feel like my life would have been so much easier. And I can say that now because that's what I'm doing now, and it's working a lot better. But I kind of just let this like eat at me. I was like, oh, but like what if like when I see them tomorrow, like how is it gonna be? Like, I was always so paranoid about it. First of all, it wasn't really that big of a deal. Like, looking at it now, like looking at the grand scheme of things, like it was so minuscule compared to like my life, that I was really letting this eat at me for no reason. I mean, obviously like it was affecting my everyday life, but it didn't need to, is what I'm trying to say. And if I feel like if I had broken down like my day-to-day life, like I could have just made it less of a priority, and it would have been not so present in my mind. And so just kind of like breaking down things and prioritizing like certain things that are important to you. obviously every situation is going to be different and everyone's difficult times look different, but for me, kind of just like breaking down things and prioritizing. So prioritizing my self-care and my time to like refuel my body and my battery and like recharge everything is super important. And so I feel like now when I've been in some situations that I feel like I could add to the story of being difficult in my life, I've kind of just like prioritize things that are important first, and they don't end up either blowing up to be super difficult or as big. And so yeah, I just would say try and break it down and make priorities. If there's a super important person in your life and you're having like a debacle, I guess I could say, like obviously I would prioritize that, but these people haven't been super like top tier priority on my list of important people in my life. And so I feel like I wasn't really prioritizing the people that I cared about, including like my friends or my family, and like the way I was like reacting to them. I was letting these people kind of be on the top of those lists. And I feel like if I had prioritized other people and I had kind of taken a step back and like broke things down, I would have realized that. And so now I'm kind of just like sweep it under the rug. Like obviously there are certain things where like you need to speak up, but I have just found that confrontation with people that are either angry at the world or just like insecure or jealous or whatever the case may be, it's not worth it. And so I kind of just like sweep it under the rug, do it myself. And so that's what I found to work for me. Like I can take like a few hits, and like if you want to say certain things, like if I can't get rid of you in my life, like go for it, but it's not gonna affect me anymore. And so I don't know, like just being able to prioritize people that care is also super important. Like care about you, like people's opinions that you care about. I think having on like your list of priorities and kind of just like breaking down tasks can be super helpful. And so that's kind of what I have to say about that. But then next I have limit the stress and like the hard times. Obviously you can't do that in every case. Like I couldn't help if I was getting bullied at school. Like what was I supposed to do? Stop going to school? Like no. But you know, it eventually worked out where I got to transfer schools. But having someone either like in class or on your team or in a living situation, you can't just like drop them. Like you're gonna see them daily. And so kind of like limiting your interactions with them would be my best advice. Like either hanging out with like the other people in your class or on your team or who you're living with, I would say really helped me get through those times. So I will say, like, you can't just outright like never see them again. I wish, but you can't. And so just kind of limiting those, but then also like rewarding yourself like when you do get put in those like higher intense situations. Like if you handle the situation well, like maybe you should go get some like of a sweet treat, something of like a sweet treat, and treat yourself because you made it through that situation and didn't cry. Or maybe you held it together in front of them, but afterwards you cried. Like go get some ice cream to make yourself feel better, or go read a book, or go buy a book, or something like that. The next thing I have is reflect back on these times to see what went right and what went wrong. I feel like this is the biggest tip I have for kind of growing in these situations, because I feel like each time I've been dealt in one of these difficult times or a difficult person, I've handled it differently. And I feel like now I can handle it a lot better for myself. And I think it's important to like, when you get put in a difficult time, like you have to prioritize your emotions and how you feel first, especially when you've tried to either talk to this person and they're not listening, or you've tried to like make it known that you're not like in like the situation you're in isn't healthy and they're just not listening. Prioritize yourself. Like you can't control their actions, you can't control what they say or how they feel. And so prioritizing yourself, I think, is super important, because at the end of the day, like, it's you. Like, you're gonna be in your own head. Like, you are talking to yourself. Like, you're the one that's gonna feel how you feel at the end of the day. And if you're putting yourself continuously in those stressful situations, like, you're gonna feel extremely tired and drained. And so putting yourself first, I think, is super important. And just being able to reflect back on these moments and just kind of see, like, I would have changed this. Like, looking back on it, like, how would I have handled being bullied differently? How would I have handled being in a situation differently? But also, like, what went right? Like, what would I continue to do moving on in the future? And so I think it's super important just to keep growing and understanding yourself and being, obviously, like, no matter what you do in life, like, I'm only in college. Like, who knows how many difficult people I will continue to have to be put in situations with for the rest of my life. And so I just want to think that every time that happens, like, I'm getting closer and closer to handling the situation better and better at, like, the first try. And so I just think about, like, what happens when I go to, like, get my dream job and my boss sucks. He's like, he or she, they are a horrible person. Like, I've had so many different, like, what's the word? Experiences. I've had so many different experiences with so many different people. Like, I eventually know how to handle the situation. And so that's what I like to think about. I feel like it's more positive instead of just, like, wallowing in the fact that, like, people are going to tear you down. There's something that Taylor Swift said. I know, I have to bring her in. She said something along the lines of, like, people are going to try and take credit for what you've done and bring you down. But, like, at the end of the day, like, you're the person that's going to be, like, you're the person in charge of making the narrative. And so I think that's just something that I try to remember, is that there are horrible people in this world, and they're going to try and bring you down, and they're going to make your life harder. But at the end of the day, like, you're the one that gets to write your own story. And so for me, like, that's kind of just what I think about when I'm put in difficult situations, is I'm like, well, at the end of the day, like, it's my story. And if I'm going to let this person affect me, like, they better be, like, you know, like, I'm not going to let someone who, wait, I'm at a loss of words really fast. Wait, I'm not going to let someone whose opinion I don't care about, like, rule my world. Like, I'm going to let people that I care about's opinion, like, direct me in what I do. And so, yeah, although I will just say, like, before we end, just remember that everyone copes differently in difficult times, and everyone also, like, has a different definition of a difficult time. For me, like, when I think about difficult times, I think about having to kind of go and, like, be in situations with difficult people and kind of just, like, handling those, because those for me are super high in, like, intensity and stress for me. And so I would just say, like, just remember that everyone's gonna have a different story. Everyone's gonna have a different way to cope with things. Everyone's gonna have, like, kind of a different, like, take on a situation and how they would react. And so just remember that it's gonna be okay. We're gonna get through it. I would like to say there's always a light at the end of the tunnel, and it might not feel that way right now, but I promise you, there will be a time where this is going to be so small, and you can look back and laugh at it with your friends or your family, or with yourself. You can be reminded, as my therapist and I like to call it, little glimmer moments, where you'll be in, like, a situation and you'll be like, oh my gosh, like, this is this may be how I would have reacted in the past, but this is how I'm going to react now. And kind of just, like, reflecting on that and being able to, like, glimmer and shine and glow just because you've seen growth. And so just remember that if you're in a situation and it's not going the way you wanted, and someone is being either really mean or just not helpful, just remember that you're going to be there at the end of the day. They're not going to be there for you when you go to bed at night, or when you're in your room, or you're alone. Like, you're going to be with yourself. And I think that's just super important to remember. But I would just like to say before I end the episode that this difficult time will pass. There will be light at the end of the tunnel. The grass might not always be greener on the other side, but there will always be a light at the end of the tunnel, and this will pass. So just try and remember that, and I promise we will get through this together. But that is all I have to say on difficult times. And I hope this is somewhat helpful if you're going through a difficult time or you're struggling with difficult people, but I promise you it will get better. So, thank you so much for listening, and I will see you next time.